Welcome to Yoga Biz Camp with myself, Michael J. I'm a yoga business coach with 25 plus years of experience as a creative, a total tech geek, and a yoga business owner. Welcome to another episode of Yoga Biz Camp. Today, I am thrilled to have Katie Santos joining me. Katie is a fellow Mindbody consultant. She actually was one of the instructors on my course when I got certified, and I'm just going to read her bio in a second, but welcome, Katie.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I just wish it was in person. We're so close.
I did get to see you in person not long ago, so that was
Yeah.
awesome. I'm just going to read your bio, Katie. So Katie Santos is the founder of Katie Santos Consulting and Fitness HR, an internationally recognized movement teacher with a 38-year track record of being a hyper-organized authority, I need some of that, on building and maintaining realistic and achievable business goals. Pursuing a human resources certification allowed Katie to focus on helping studios comply with recent employment law changes around the country. Katie's knowledge of the unique nature of the fitness and wellness industry's needs related to employees allows her to be their partner and advocate as they navigate the new law changes. Katie is focused on helping businesses and people become the best that they can be with the power of Evernote and work the system. She encourages business leaders to leverage their big ideas with simple solutions so they can concentrate on success.
I
Yay,
didn't write
Katie.
that, but I got it commissioned. It was pretty good.
It's always weird hearing your bio
It
read
is.
out too. Yeah. And I just want to say Katie was she was one of the instructors and leaders on the training course that I took to get certified to be a business consultant. And Katie, different people have different approaches, and I got to say, you just gave everything. You didn't hold anything back. Some people don't want to share how they do things or behind the scenes things, and you just were so generous with your information, and I'm very grateful, and I know my fellow people that were in training with me really appreciated that too. When we had the sessions where we could just chat with you, you gave everything. So I think that actually says a lot about you. And the other thing I'm going to say is you're so respected by your peers. You have such good relationships with all the big wigs at Mindbody and the champs and consultants. And I think that you're just such a generous heart, and that people really like being around you and respect you. And I think that's why you keep getting invited to Mindbody universities and all sorts of things.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so glad you're recording this on it. When I have a down day, I'll listen in again.
We'll
I
make a
appreciate
sound
it.
clip for you.
Yeah. No, when you think about the state of things today, I appreciate you recognizing that and thinking that. And I try really hard every day to be that way and just to be able to listen to others' points of views and, incorporate what you can incorporate and leave gracefully the things that you don't resonate with. But, I appreciate that you recognize that. I just think the word consultant and the word teacher means that you are to give, right? I think a lot of us
Yeah,
are in this business for that.
yeah.
There's certainly a lot of ego around lots of our work. I'm not saying in any field in
Yeah.
particular, because it's all of them, but I think at heart, most people's goal is to help others. So I'm glad I'm
Yeah.
achieving that finally.
And I went through your LinkedIn this morning too, and you had Balanced Body Studio. So that was a Pilates studio, correct? Mostly.
They are a big Turning Point Studios is the studio that fostered this woman named Nora St. John, who became aligned with Balanced Body, who is a Pilates equipment manufacturer. And oddly, when we opened our studio in 2002, three, we started to think about doing teacher training. And as the universe often does, it keeps putting things in your way when it's not meant to happen. And we just kept thinking, oh, I don't want to make a manual, and oh, it's a lot of work.
Mm.
So Nora who then aligned with Balanced Body, said, well, listen, I'm going to start an education arm and a certification arm, and you guys can be in our first group of providers, so to speak. So that's what that is.
Okay.
We're teacher training providers for the Pilates arm of Balanced Body. So
And you're very involved in the Pilates Method Alliance, and I see that you were VP there as
I
well.
was, yeah, we had a shakeup in last May, June, like a lot of businesses did. And in a lot of ways, things weren't handled correctly. In our defense, most of us that were on that board were just trying to keep our own studios afloat. So it was a little challenging to try to be a vice president and a voice for the industry when you're trying just to keep your teachers fed.
Yeah.
So I've stepped away from the board position. I'm doing some committee work with an area that I really resonate with called Heroes in Motion, which was developed around using the Pilates work for complex casualty amputees and
Okay.
war injured
Oh,
folks, but
wow.
then has now expanded more to neurological disorders and things like that. So
Uh,
I wasn't going to let that part go because that's my
yeah.
heart.
The heart stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your journey towards owning your studio?
Yeah. I grew up on a ranch, so I've always been kind of a movement person, but in that growing up in the ranch world and the sports world, I got back injuries and all that sort of stuff. So I ended up at St. Francis Hospital in San Francisco with this kind of yucky diagnosis. And the doctor said, well, you need Pilates. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do Pilates, but they won't let me in. I'm not a ballet dancer. I'm a ranch girl. So he said, no, 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 right through this door, I have a whole Pilates universe going on. So I walked in there, and this is where I met Nora St. John, who now is still my mentor. So having gotten involved with that, I had been a bodybuilder in the past and got out of that kind of ugly business. I'll say it right here. I thought I'll go back into movement and I'll do this Pilates thing. And fast forward, we couldn't really find teacher training until it was developed later on. Um, I started in a club atmosphere working with a brilliant Pilates teacher, but in a tiny, tiny little room. And she was quite a personality.
Yeah.
And another girl that was working with me, I said, why don't we just open a Pilates studio and we can get out of this tiny room with this big personality? So she said, okay. And one evening while she was out with our third partner, who wasn't a partner then, they had too many margaritas. And she said to this other partner, why don't you join us? And I said, oh, why are we inviting her? She and I aren't getting along. But it all worked out. The three of us opened. We took full year to plan. We did a thorough business plan. We vetted everything, how much money do we need to make? How much is possible to generate if it's just the three of us teaching? Is there some gravy to be made if we can hire other teachers? And we finally opened in 2003. Again, the universe prevailed because we saw the space that we eventually opened about 6 months before we actually did, and they turned us down. And we went back to the drawing board, and it was obvious that we had more work to do. So then we came back to that space, and they said, okay, we understand what you're doing. We'll let you open now. So it's kind of, we very much, the three of us, respect when the universe says, not yet, or
Yeah.
don't hire, or
Yeah.
maybe not a good choice. We're like, okay, we have to listen to that. So we had a good run. We almost 20 years.
Yeah. That's a long time in this industry.
Yeah. And we were doing great. I mean, we hit six figures, seven figures, close to the year before the pandemic. And when that hit, we had one partner who had a stroke. Another one had a new little girl who she realized, wait a minute, I like being at home with her and not being at the
Yeah.
studio all the time. So we made the tough decision to close down. We took the time at that point to take the 15 people that work for us and say, okay, we've got 3 months until we close. We're going to help you get your own businesses up and running,
Oh,
from
wow.
your
And
need
this
for
was recently,
licenses.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we started that in midsummer last year. We knew we were going to close the end of September. So we coached them through how to do a business plan, how to look for a lease, how to do your pricing, what does your liability stuff look like, all of that. Yeah. What software do you choose?
Yeah.
So they're now all running their own businesses successfully. A
That's
couple want.
that's amazing. When you were very involved in Mindbody and all the trainings, and so you know all the things to do to build and sustain and systems so did that all of that knowledge help you in creating a profitable business?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. We always made sure that we set numbers that were realistic. And we had different areas of our businesses and our business. And there was the primary area was personal training, whether it was with 1 to 3 or 4 people. And that was the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of the business. And everything else was gravy. So everything we ran as far as numbers was, as long as we can sustain this piece of the business, everything else is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Right. So we knew we had to hold on to that. That said, we didn't want to get too, there's a lot of studios that have all sorts of different things going on. And we did have a lot of things going on, which was challenging at times, especially to divide with 3 partners who's going to do what, who's in charge of
yeah. So
what
you mean
section.
lots of things, as in you splintered off to
Yeah,
different
we
things
had,
other than Pilates?
right. We did different things other than Pilates. We all had fitness backgrounds and athletic training backgrounds. We did teacher training with Balanced Body. We did our own teacher training. We
Yeah.
did continuing ed. We did, workshops for clients. So we had a whole teacher arm and a client arm. And then we entertained having a retail arm. And we went, wait a
Yeah,
minute.
believe me, I went through retail and I dumped it because it was no matter what was happening, there was always over $20,000 sitting on the shelf,
Yeah.
and that's a full time job in itself, just retail. And so
Yeah.
I ended up changing it so that I had a mandate; it had to support practice.
Yeah.
And so the things that we used in classes, like, whether massage balls or things like that, those
Mhm.
are the things that sold. And I let go of all the Buddhas and the crystals and the
That's exactly what happened to us. I mean, we had Lululemon for a while until they decided to open stores. And when they pulled everything, we went, well, our butts are not going to look so cute anymore, but that's all right. We were ordering for ourselves and it was kind of silly.
Yeah, yeah, I had Prana clothing.
Yeah, we did too. Love it. I
Yeah,
still
love
have
it,
some.
but it's difficult because you have to order a year in advance. You
Yeah.
have to sort of you have to know what's gonna be in style in a year and what sizes are gonna sell, and you've always gotta have 5 of every size, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's very, very tough.
Well,
But
we did learn though toward the end that a lot of these retailers got smart and had on demand stuff, or
yeah,
I forget what the term is. I know there's an official
yeah, they're
retail.
like the print on demand and
Yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and I also learned that we had clients that were not necessarily what you'd call svelte and fit,
yeah,
and the same stuff in a size 12 doesn't look as cute as it did in a size 4.
yeah.
We didn't know that until we bought the size 12s and they didn't sell.
Yeah, and then you've got to blow them off on sale.
Yeah.
Some people are going to be wondering, why have I got a Pilates gal on my yoga biz account?
Mm,
And the reason is because I mean, as far as the mind body world goes, you really are the queen of HR, human resources. You really are. And and in your bio, you were talking about the new rules. So I'd love to kind of talk about that because I'm not going to lie, I'm a little oblivious to that world, and I think there's going to be a lot of people also that are studio owners that are, kind of oblivious too. And I know it's a complicated thing because it's going to be different in different regions. And
mhm.
but can you sort of go over briefly what the new rules are and what that
Yeah.
might mean?
So the reason I got involved is we switched over from independent contractors about,
Yeah,
I guess, 15 years or so ago. And it was for a couple of reasons. The first was we had a fellow studio be audited and they prevailed, but they said, it cost us $25,000 to defend ourselves in that audit.
yeah,
And I went,
yeah,
well, I don't have that laying around. And at the time, the rules were quite a bit, they had quite a bit more latitude than they do now. but I knew we weren't quite meeting them, and I wanted to be able to sleep at night. But second to that, and more important, I didn't realize until about a year into this, was that we not only offered a more consistent product, so to speak, to our clients, and we did have yoga along with Pilates and
Yeah.
everything else. The product was much more consistent. The staff was more consistent. The messaging could be delivered about who Absolute Center was and what we meant to people. And that wasn't clear to me when we first set along this journey. Add to that, our business became instantly more valuable, because the reality of all of our wellness businesses is that we're selling the lease, we're selling some of the props and things and equipment if it's in our studio, and maybe, and the lowest value of all, because we're so personality driven, is the client base. You
Yeah.
know, we had a
And
large client,
reputation.
yeah, and reputation. But when you sell a business with a cadre of employees that work there that are all rowing in the same direction, I like to say,
I like
that
that.
business is much, much, much more valuable.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a aha moment. And our revenue, I did some heavy duty math and Excel spreadsheeting, and that my business partners were like, you do it and show me when you're done. Um, they We knew we were going to take a little bit of a hit. Um, but really at the end of the first year, we didn't. We'd gone up quite a bit, and we had been open 12 years at that point. Pardon the noise in the background if you hear it. I'm sorry. Um, we we figured out that because that brand delivery was so consistent, the clients had a better time moving from one teacher to the other or one class to the other. And we just gained a bigger, better reputation through that consistency, I think.
So you said you did that 15 years ago. I think that's really way ahead of the curve, because that's almost unheard of in, 15 years ago, I think, because it's always been contractors. I still think it's
Right.
quite a lot of
Hmm.
contractors out there. I had an interesting a couple of years ago. I went to had an awful experience. I'd had my own studio for 13 years, and then I sold it, and then I thought, oh, I want to go teach downtown, and so I went and had a horrible experience for another studio where they just did everything wrong. But when I left there and I went to make some complaints about that experience, I had no voice with any authority, like absolutely none of the government authorities or
Right.
WorkSafe or anything like that. Had zero voice on it
Yeah.
as a contractor.
So we found that, so one of my business partners had a stroke in 2019. Yes. And because we were all employees, we had changed the structure of our business from an LLC to a sub S. We'd elected to file as a sub S. I know that's an American thing, but we were then employees rather than partners of the business. And that did a number of things. It saved us a ton on taxes because the business was paying our taxes for us. And it enabled my partner, when she had her stroke, she immediately had access to disability, which I
Yeah,
know in Canada, because I have relatives in Canada, and one of them went through a similar thing that my other business partner did. And I know you guys get checks almost right away. Well, in the US, we don't.
yeah,
Um, so she was protected. Then, when this pandemic hit, all of our staff were protected because they could go file for unemployment.
yeah,
Those that didn't want to stay, or even those that did want to stay and teach virtually, we had contracted our business to such an extent that they had dollars to make up. So they were protected. Additionally, in California, and it turned out nationwide after the start of the pandemic, there was protections in the form of sick pay. We had started that in California quite a while ago. So they had those sick pay opportunities. Now, I've been teaching in the wellness world and in the restaurant world for a long time. You don't get sick pay in either
yeah,
one of those.
yeah,
So if I could give that to our employees as a benefit, that's a win, because I
yeah,
couldn't afford healthcare. I couldn't afford necessarily 401ks. Um, So all in all, especially now, I believe as business owners, these are the people that are these employees are the people that work for us are our partners in
Yeah.
delivering wellness. The more we can take care of them, the better off they will be, the more loyal to us they will
Yeah.
be, the healthier our clients will be. I mean, nobody loses in my
And I was hearing from you before that you created a consistency with having employees as opposed to contractors who basically make their own rules, can turn up if they don't not show up if they don't want to. And
yeah.
so there's a consistency and you have a little bit more control in your business, would you say?
Mhm. Right. We could, we had a certain philosophy of how people needed to progress through their movement education because we saw so much dysfunction, as all of us do in the movement world now.
Yeah.
And we developed a certain protocol that, it wasn't cookie cutter, but you as a practitioner needed to know the parameters of what we were thinking, what we had developed in order to deliver what we felt was the best product we could deliver. And I couldn't, there's no way we could tell an independent contractor to do that. They might buy in, but they might go, ooh, I learned something over here and let me try this.
Yeah.
And more than once, probably all business owners have experienced this where you're hiding in the office and going, oh my God, what are they showing that client? I don't even want to, I can't look. I
Yeah, yeah,
didn't want any more of that. So aside from the product that we delivered, we also had a certain philosophy over years. And I learned a lot from the people that worked for me. I had a couple of gals a few years ago that had no qualms about calling me on the carpet when it came to things that I thought were great ideas. And they went, not very forward thinking, or you're not taking in consideration about the diversity of our clientele, and you're not thinking about this population that we do serve. And I'm like, as much as I don't like to be told I'm wrong, yes, you were right. So that dialogue that we could create between our employees and ourselves, I really think helped to grow our programming and grow our the philosophy of what we offered and what we meant to not only clients, but what we also could say that we meant to teachers.
yeah. So for the small to medium studio, I think they kind of think, I know I probably did that, an employee is for a larger business
Mhm.
or a franchise or, something like that. So what would you say to the small to medium sized business um, that's struggling right now too,
Yeah.
to sort of be able to switch that way?
So the reality is, at least in the States, California started this a few years back. And now that we have a different administration, things are changing on the federal level and in many other states. And it'll be a rule
Yeah.
in a lot of places that no matter what your size, as long as the kind of easy way to look at it is if you're running a yoga studio and you hire a meditation teacher or a yoga teacher or a breathwork teacher, those are all pretty similar modalities.
Yeah.
And they certainly are similar. Somebody from a state entity coming in, they have no idea that there's a difference
Yeah.
between the Reiki guy or the so when there's a similar business offering, that triggers an employee relationship rather than an independent
Yeah.
contractor
Yeah.
relationship. And to simplify, I've talked to lots of different people. Well, what if I do it this way or I do it that way or they rent or they this? It's just easier to comply and not have to think about it. And like I said before, it's not that expensive. There are startup costs, but the trade-off for me and for the clients that I work with is that I can sleep at night. I know there isn't an audit coming down my way because
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
scary,
Yeah. Yeah.
very scary.
Yeah.
And I have clients going through them right now who hadn't completely changed over when the pandemic hit. The second piece, like I said, is the protection of those people that work for us. I mean, we are all caregivers at heart in this industry. And if we can give that same level of care to the employees that work for us or the staff that works for us, that we do to our clients, everybody wins.
Yeah.
Um, there's there's just a lot more scrutiny now too, especially in the States, of teachers that have gone to entities to say, hey, I need unemployment, or gee, I was working for this studio and I was an independent contractor and I don't really think I should have been because I was doing X, Y, and Z. All of those are triggering visits from the government that you really don't
The
want.
tax man, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm kind of curious, in all of your years of running your studio, um, what hiring lessons that you learned, and also I'm going to second that with what firing lessons
Oh
you
yeah.
learned.
I'm going to dispel. So everybody's heard this hire slow, fire fast moniker, and I
Yeah.
actually don't believe in that.
Okay.
I believe in hiring slow. My number one thing is don't be desperate. And we have all been there, and we
Oh,
are all probably there right now,
yeah.
right? Oh, this person, look, they can do a down dog and stand on their head. Let's go.
Yeah.
um, it's tricky. It's so much work, and I have to respect that. I don't have my studio any longer. We closed. I This level of stress that I know you guys are all carrying right now just astounds me. So I have chills. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you guys are all stars that have made it through this and are still working. And when you get to a Saturday night and you think, "Oh my God, I've taught 7 days this last week and a half, and I'm so burned out and I can't see my 2-year-old. This person looks like they might be decent. Let me bring them on." Try very hard not to.
I was on the other side of a tunnel, you know where Ladner is in, I was on the other side of the tunnel, so I pretty much could only hire on my side of the tunnel for a few people.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
exactly.
talk about desperate sometimes, and
Yeah,
those were the ones that were the worst hires.
yeah. So I think it's important now to really look at people's soft skills, their people skills, and
Mm,
we can train them to do
yes,
whatever we need them to do,
yeah.
whether it's yoga or Pilates or whatever. Most of the time we can do that. Will it take a lot of work and time on your part? But yes, but there's not too many alternatives. And as far as the fire fast, um, almost every time almost every time an employee did something incorrectly, I'm a huge believer, or something that, not incorrectly, but something I thought, she's not listening.
Yeah.
I turned the lens on myself and my partners and said, okay, there's something missing in our training. There was a way that we explained something that that person didn't understand for some reason, or we flat out forgot to talk about it. It's a new thing that popped up, which always happens. So we began there to turn inward and go, where did we go wrong first, before we go jumping into this employee's basket and go, you did
I
this wrong.
love that because it's less reactionary.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if we did explain it, then the conversation was more, okay, so Sylvia, we had this plan in place that you agreed to. Is there a disconnect? Is there something you don't yet understand? Is this situation different than what was explained here? Or let's have a conversation about it. And then coach them through,
Yeah.
because you've taken the time to get your person, your employee this far. Why would you just dump them? Because trust me, right now, there's not a lot of anyone else out there to fill the void.
Yeah.
The more you can coach people through, the more empathy you can have for their situation and understanding, as frustrating as it might be. You may want to go home and go, oh my gosh, they're dinglings, but do that at home and just
Yeah.
vent, or in the car. But seek first to understand what the issue is, and can you help that person get through it? Which is not to say don't keep the person that steals from you or anything else. Or maybe there's something to understand there. I don't know. But I think you and that person are going to develop a much stronger relationship. That employee will have much more solidarity with you and your business going forward. if you can turn that situation around.
Yeah.
So hire slow, fire slow, coach them.
Yeah. I love that. I love that.
But yes, there's been other
Yeah.
opportunities where I've just said, you know what, it's not, there's just a disconnect here. There's no resonance, and see you, love you, bye. The
Yeah.
other thing is, try not to hire the rock stars because they're the rock stars. They
Yeah.
have to align with you and your values and your business. We got
That,
caught into that 3 times and got burned every time.
yeah, yeah, I super agree with that. The rock stars I found that I had were always soliciting for their own things within my studio space. Um, and that was
Yeah.
always. Can you tell me a little bit about your? I just had this conversation with Eric on the last podcast, but your onboarding process, because most yoga teachers go in to serve, they don't go into it for business, and so like myself, I didn't have a clue about that stuff. And
Mhm.
so a lot of my hiring, at the beginning wasn't so great. But then when I got an onboarding process, and now that's what I do first thing with all of my clients in the studios, is that onboarding process. So you must have put a really good structure into place for hiring and onboarding.
We did. I had a lot of help from my business partner, Claudia, because she had done hiring in big clubs before. So when I started on this journey all those years ago of bringing employees on, she really helped. But over the years, what happened is we found that there was a couple of things. We developed our strategic objectives and our operating principles. And the strategic objectives told the public what we were about.
Yeah.
The operating principles were kind of the rules of the road,
Behind the
the
scenes.
gray areas of the business. And those fed into the job descriptions that we had. So it really has to start with that, to make sure that the person you're bringing on meets the criteria in that job description, which
Yeah.
is not to say that you have to have the same description for every yoga teacher or Pilates
Mhm.
teacher. You can have different levels, a junior yoga teacher or a more, senior yoga teacher, and they can have slightly different uh, criteria in there. There had to be a full understanding on the part of the employee that that's what they were coming in to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And then all the documentation as we were onboarding and all the training fed right into that. So our handbook that talked about, all the legalese, you get this much sick pay, here's who you talk to when you need a vacation, all of that kind of stuff. And then the manual that was the day to day, here's how to run Mindbody, here's how to ask for a day off, here's what to do if someone gets injured, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just this onboarding process, we had about 40 hours of kind of on the ground admin, and we found that it was successful when we had our teachers come in and do admin time, especially the newer ones, for a while. They learned the vibe of the studio. Clients got to see their faces. Most of them were personal trainers. So in order for them to fill their schedule, they needed to get a little face time in the studio. Same thing to fill in their classes. Then we had certain check-ins. We had, one of my studios calls it the loveys. So each new employee had a lovey that stayed with them. And my little HR brain goes, okay, yeah, no, we can't call them that anymore. They're pals or whatever. So that was part of the onboarding, was to have a buddy and to have one of our more senior trainers that led them further down the journey of, this is what the absolute center process looks like when you bring
Yeah.
in a new client. Here's how to assess them, all that
Yeah.
stuff. So there was lots of touch points for several months. What I learned toward the end was there needed to be lots of casual conversations. And yeah, it's a lot of work. We had 15 teachers. So there was 3 of us that divvied up the, touching each one of these teachers once a week or once every 2 weeks, just
Mm.
casual, how are you? Checking in,
Yeah.
listening to whatever's going on in their personal lives. Is their mom sick, or did their dog die?
Yeah.
Those are all important things to know about the people that work for you.
Yeah.
Um, and then we did a regular process of evaluations every year, and they weren't necessarily tied to pay raises. They were just, again, more formal conversations about what's working, what's not working, what do you as an employee have as far as feedback for us
Hmm.
that you've seen we've done well or that we need to improve on? Did we meet our promises when we brought you on board?
Yeah.
And then we would tweak this, all of this stuff we would tweak every year. We'd tweak the job
I
description.
always say they're a live document, right?
Yeah,
They never. It's not like you finish it and it's over with. It's a live
right.
document that you scribble on and change and then retype it out. And
Yeah. And
yeah,
it doesn't necessarily have to fall to the owner exclusively. The more we learn to delegate to other people, the more empowered those employees felt, the better their career trajectories were. A lot of them were pretty much well equipped to step out on their own because they'd been doing some of this work
yeah,
for us.
yeah. Um,
So,
Eric on the last episode, he said that he did the regular onboarding stuff, but then he actually showed them the behind the scenes of, mind in the Mindbody software. But he said he spends a lot of time showing them the business side of things,
yes.
of what it takes to attract and retain a customer. And he says
Hmm.
when you really he said when you really did that, they got an idea of how much work it is behind the scenes. When a teacher just shows up to teach, that's
Yes.
not just the case, right? There's a lot that happens to get that student there and maintain them.
Yeah, we did that as well, more so as they got further along in their career, because there's a lot, happening when they first came in. But especially when it came to the teachers that said, "Hey, I want to do a workshop on whatever," we had a whole form. So,
Yeah.
what's the name of the workshop? When do you want to offer it? That gave them the responsibility to look at the
Yes.
studio schedule. Is there a spot there?
Yeah.
um, how do you think it needs to be marketed? How long is it? All of that stuff. Are you willing to step forward and do X, Y, and Z for marketing and give us a little narrative of what that looks like? So that really helped them,
Mm.
run their business in our business, which is what they do, even as employees. They're running a business within a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
The other thing that I had a strong belief in was sharing our financial wins and losses as they
Okay.
occurred. Not everyone's comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Um, but I gave them a reality, like we're paying $14,000 a month rent. And when you leave the lights on, I'm a little bit of a pain in the neck when it came to lights and air conditioning and
I
stuff.
had my pet peeves.
Oh, people would just laugh at me. I'm like, okay, it's fine. I don't care. But here's our utility bill, and here's what it looks like to replace the toilet paper in the bathroom and all of that stuff. And as we went through the pandemic, we shared all of that with them. We went from 90K a month down to 50K a month,
Yeah.
and here's what the salaries are, and here's what we as owners are making. I was fine sharing all of that because I
Yeah.
wanted them to not feel that they were working for some big conglomerate that was writing checks to themselves and
Yeah.
going around doing whatever. But that's not for everybody. Everyone has to make their own
Yeah.
choice about that.
Can you tell me a little bit? So, a problem right now out there is the sub situation. So, people having to cancel classes. Some teachers are not comfortable to go back into the studio. Other teachers, such as myself, have decided to not go back and go solo, virtual only. What did you do? So that's the problem for a lot of people now, is that
Right.
sub situation. Can you first of all just tell me what kind of system you used for subs? Because that's always a studio owner's,
Yes, that's the
dilemma.
hard.
Email doesn't quite work on that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No. So we had a couple of different ways. We had a Slack channel that
Yeah.
was subs needed, and that worked out pretty well. But it almost has to be a multi-channel system if it's going to be kind of quasi analog. We had a board in the back because we had classes of different kinds and we had private training. We had two different forums. Here's the one on private training, here's the one for classes. And the private training stuff, we allowed them to delegate. I'm I need a sub for Margie. She usually comes in Tuesday, Thursday, but she's flexible. And she needs a trainer of at least this level or
Okay.
higher,
All right.
and she's willing to pay for it. The class, the same thing. Here's an advanced reformer class that needs a sub. I need somebody at least of a senior level to teach that. They would sign, the subs would sign the form. The form would come to one of us partners. We'd make the change in Mindbody, and we'd make sure, they then were responsible.
Right.
So that analog version worked pretty well. If a teacher wasn't in the studio and couldn't get to that form, they would use the Slack channel. I'm a huge fan, if they're still there, of SubSync.
Okay.
So I talked to them at, what was the bowl we had before 2019, at length. The only reason we didn't pick them up, because at that time they couldn't handle appointments. They could only do classes, but they were great. I liked their whole vibe about, they listened to everything that I had to say about what we needed in our business, as far as appointments, but also in classes. And they were just very proactive in saying, well, let's see what we can tweak in our software to meet your needs.
Right.
So I think if anybody's got Mindbody, they should take a look at that.
Yeah, there's also Net Gym as well.
Yeah,
I met him, so he's sort of doing a similar thing. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, studios definitely need a system other than email, I believe. For um, Eric's was a WhatsApp group. Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, I think I kind of I was a fan of the Slack channel. A couple of my clients have adopted it. They like it. But it's aside from the fact of just the mechanics of getting the sub situation sorted, it's where are the people to sub?
yeah,
That's the other
and
issue.
that's the issue right now, in not just in the studios, but also in the restaurants, and it's
Mhm.
an issue everywhere. And we had a little quick chat prior to us recording, but about there being a whole slew of new teachers that have left studios and have gone out on their own. Was that something in your studio towards the end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I said, we kind of trained our people up and let them go. I would say out of the 15 that went, there's probably 3 that are now ready to come back to being an employee. And
Right.
I think that's going to happen more over the next 3 or 4 months
Yeah.
for several reasons. Number 1, these gals realize, wait a minute, running your own show is a pain in the neck. And they filed their taxes on September 15th. So here we are 6 days later, when they realize, oh dear, I'm paying self-employment tax now. It's not such a great deal, even though I'm charging more. I don't have the protections of sick pay and time off and workers' comp if I get hurt. They also, I feel, at least in our business, we worked a lot with the camaraderie. I wanted to be able to look over at my business partner and go, what is she teaching that person over there that's got a hip problem?
Yeah.
Or how is she addressing that class and getting them to pay attention? We don't get that food when we're working on our own, and we certainly don't get it when we're teaching virtually. So I think there's going to be a virtual fatigue at some point when we can get over the fear of coming back in person.
Mm.
There's it's a tough one. I like to say that all of these things aren't one specific reason. There's a number of different
Yeah.
reasons these things are happening. So I think all of those forces will work to hopefully turn the employees back to coming into studios and subbing and raising their hands and saying, yes, I want to work for
Yeah.
someone again.
Yeah, and I think it's also dependent on how many people are coming back to classes too, right? I
Right.
mean, and it's different everywhere. I mean, you were just in Canada, and it is slow getting people back into the studio in-person
Yeah,
experience.
but you know what? In Steveston, I walked into a where my niece works, in a PT place, and they had 15 people in their TRX class.
Is that right? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we as businesses, we have to engender enough trust
Yeah.
for our clients to be able to come back
Yeah.
and
I agree.
respect those fears. Same with our employees.
Yeah.
And if we can bust our little tushes and do what we need to do the right thing by all those populations,
Yeah.
people will come back.
I wanted to sort of finish off here with you are the Evernote queen. So speaking of systems, and when you did the training, you mentioned Evernote so much, and afterwards we're like, I think she likes Evernote.
I'm so hooked
Tell me
on it.
why.
It's
So
insane.
I mean, I'm ADHD, and it can be super disorganized, and I think a lot of people in our world are too. So why does Evernote work for you?
I started it, I'm kind of one of those early adopters. I want to do everything when it's really brand new, which is really kind of dumb most of the time because things aren't up to snuff yet. But I started with Evernote almost when it first started, and I started clipping in things like recipes. And we have a very robust family reunion and family history situation. So all of that went in there. And then as we opened Absolute, I could show you my room right now, but you'd see my dog. There is no paper in my place at all. It's all scanned and lives in Evernote. And our onboarding, for one thing, lives in an Evernote notebook, all numbered. So here's number one, the application, or number two, one is the job description, actually. Number two, the application, and step by step what everybody needed, so that if we would have these little conversations when I go travel to teach, and I'm like, if in case my plane goes down, this is where all the stuff is, right? So my partners knew where everything was in Evernote. They knew what the onboarding process was if something happened to me. All of our financial documents were in there. As we applied for PPP, I could collect everything I needed for the PPP loan, keep it in one notebook, Absolute Centers PPP, there it is. And then at the end of the year, when the accountant needed that stuff, I just go, here it is. I transferred, my business partner's husband called me one time. I was out shopping actually. And he said, I need the returns for 2015 because we're refinancing our house. He says, I'm willing to bet you have it on your phone. And I said, you're right. It's in Evernote. And I emailed it to him. He's like, this is awesome. So I
So
use
why is it
that.
different? Why is it different than, let's say, Google Drive or
Oh,
the Notes app on my phone
yeah,
or
way.
Dropbox? Or so what is the
So it can take verbal notes, so I can text into it. It can take audio notes. It can take pictures. Like I could hold my phone up and it would snap a picture just of the frame of us, thinking it's a PowerPoint, and it would put it in there, and I could search yogabizcamp.com and this would pop up. So the
okay?
search features are really robust. I can web clip, I can scan things in. So if for instance, the Bold conference, I took pictures of some of the slides. I
Yeah.
put in my own little notes. I did an audio note of something in particular that Roxanne Banta was saying that I thought really resonated. And I could date that and say, I want to review it when I come home from Bold. And maybe there's things in there I don't need. I can just trash the note, or I can pull some things out. But it's got my entire bloody life in it. And if I
I'm
lose,
hearing that you're a fan.
and it's never been hacked, and rarely is it down.
And also you're certified to educator, right? For Evernote?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
certified in Evernote. I use it kind of in the GTD, or getting things done, format.
And
So I do a
can
lot
you
of
tell me what that is?
Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Okay.
It's a bit of a complex book, but the theory is that what you want to do is get everything out of your brain and into a trusted source.
Right.
Evernote's my trusted source. So I put all my project plans in there. I've got all of your stuff in there. The email that you sent me was forwarded in, and it alerted me this morning. Remember, you're going to talk to Michael because I
Yeah.
can't remember anything. It does. And I can dump things in during the course of the week. Fridays, I sit and I look through my inbox, and basically I go, okay, this is a recipe. I'm going to tag it with pasta and dinner, and I'm going to move it into my recipes. This is my bank statement. I'm going to retitle it, and I'm going to move it into Santos Financial. This is a receipt. I'm going to retitle it, put a date, put it into my consulting receipts. So I just go, it's nice kind of mindless work on a Friday where you just go, I'm just going to sort my
I'm
paper.
going to push for a workshop for consultants.
I'll do it. I'll do it for sure. Yeah. I'm trying to see if I've got
Katie,
my.
I want to ask you something that people do not know about you.
Mm. Um, there's a couple of illegal things that I won't talk about that are no, I don't do anymore. No.
I think we did that at Bold.
Yeah. I'm a certified construction manager, and my husband is uh, and I own a construction company, so there's that. I'm a grandmother of 10,
Oh my goodness.
and I grew up on a ranch riding Arabian horses, and that was a good way to grow up.
Yeah, no
Um,
kidding.
Probably not in my bio.
So my next question, I think, is going to be an obvious one, but a business app or website. I think we've already covered that one, right?
Yeah, yeah. Done.
Okay, personal app, website.
You know, um, I think maybe The Onion, right?
Okay, yeah, yeah.
It's a
Satire.
kind of an
Yeah,
irreverent look at the news.
yeah,
I visit it every once in a while. I kind of fell off it for a while, but then I listened to a podcast the other day where they talked about The Onion started just as 9/11 happened. And so they had this whole idea of what's it going to look like when we publish on 9/12. Oh
mm,
dear, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. And so I think that's a nice way to look at news and
yeah, yeah.
listen to different things. And I have a problem shopping. I'm just going to say it right now. I know I don't need anything more. I know, but
One podcast my partner told me about was The Moth, which is people's
yeah.
just stories. I've just got hooked into that, just short, fun
Hmm.
stories.
Yeah.
Um, all right, Miss Katie Santos, can you tell us how people, what kind of clients do you serve, and how people find you?
All kinds. So I have a solopreneur coming on board. She says, I'm so busy, I need to hire more people. And I know I want to just start out right. So I'm going to hire people instead of contracting them, all the way up to a multi-unit business in Nevada, actually. And outside of that, so I help restaurants, construction companies, our local chamber, I'm helping them. But anything HR focused, I have a
Yeah,
system around this that I believe is a good way. I'm also a believer in you have to accept what I'm taking, with a grain of salt and do it your way as well. But I can be found at fitnesshr.com or katiesantos.com. And my best email is Katie, Katie, at katiesantos.com.
and you're recently on Instagram.
I am recently on Instagram, and I promised when I was in, it takes me so long. And I
I,
know we've
to-
had this
I told you
conversation.
I will help you. We need to have a
Yeah.
separate conversation.
I have so much to say, but it's like the artwork drives me nuts. So thank God for Canva and friends like Michael J that will help. And the Instagram expert, I think Sue B. I can't remember her last name. Sue B. Zimmerman. She's pretty good little way to
And
learn.
but what is your Instagram handle?
It is fitness. You know what? Shoot. Wait, I'll tell you in a second.
That
See,
should
I don't care.
roll off of your tongue.
Underscore fitness HR, because I'm in the middle of a trademark. And little known fact, did you know that once your trademark is granted, you can go back into Instagram and say, by the way, I want to get rid of that underscore and get the fitness HR that's
Oh,
sitting there that the person's not using. Yeah.
I did not know that.
I think I learned that from Corey at Conscious Consulting, but I could be wrong
Okay,
about that.
lawyer guy.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for spending your time. I think it's a important conversation to have right now. Katie is the human part of human resources. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Take care, everyone out there. Stay strong.
This is Yoga Biz Camp. This is my new by invite only dedicated space to support yoga businesses. It's like Facebook but without all the noise and clutter. Here you will find all my resources, including free monthly fireside chat business question and answer time with myself, and along with all of my different communities from studios to solos to the inner circle. Here you'll find guest interviews with leaders in our industry, and as well as all of my free resources, all in one dedicated space. If you're ready to become the next Yoga Biz champ and get private invite into my free community support space, go to yogabizcamp.com, click on Yoga Biz Camp, and I will see you on the inside. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on our podcast. It really helps us out a lot. Thanks a million.